Welcome back to another fun episode of 40% Better Podcast, where we talk about everything related to tech leadership. Sebastien has graciously volunteered to come on, tell us about his journey, and kind of, how it's been, how it's going, all the things, lessons learned, mistakes made, hopefully none are too terrible. Thanks for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Hi, Bill. So sorry.
It's
You just
okay.
go to start a video and then you're coughing into the mic.
It's the reality show, right? We are
Yeah.
all about reality. The only question that I have scripted that I ever ask people is,
Mhm.
how did you get started in leadership? Was it like you were setting up soccer teams as a kid, or you ran a shift at McDonald's, or you just got stuck into the job by some higher level authority?
Well, it's even earlier than a shift at McDonald's. So
Oh my
when I
goodness.
was a boy, I think I was about 5 years old or something like that. I had just seen my first military parade. It was, like depending on where you live, there are air shows and things like
Mhm.
that. Or if you live on a military base, for example, you will occasionally see military parade. So I saw a military parade. I thought it was great. I thought it was so great that I had all the other kids on the street kind of form up and I was barking whatever a 5-year-old or 6-year-old thinks military commands are. And I made them go up and down the street. And what was really fun was that at the time, and this was mid 70s or
Mhm.
late 70s. At the time, like the parents were like coming out onto their porch and they were seeing this little dude, because I was not super old at that point. And I was doing this and apparently it went on for like 15, 20 minutes. And there were kids that are much older that were participating because just looked fun kind of thing.
Nice. I like that.
Yeah. And so, at 5, you don't know if you want to be a doctor, an astronaut, or an accountant. You don't know
Right,
that.
right.
I just thought it was cool and I wanted to do it some more. And so I just got a whole bunch of people to participate in this activity. And it's a little unusual to have a younger kid telling older kids, but there were enough kids there that nobody cared and they all just
Right,
wanted to
right.
participate.
Well, it's you brought in a fun factor,
Yeah.
and people respond to that, and so that's awesome. Um, okay, so 5 years old to now, what were kind of some of the inflection points along that path?
Well, I was, as we continued or as I continued to move forward, I was in various youth movements like the Boy Scouts, and I continued up through that. Eventually, by the time I get into late high school and college, I'm not really doing any. Oh, that's not true. I'm forgetting my own history.
Yeah.
So eventually, I joined the Army Reserve when I was 18, and so I was in the Signal Corps, which basically meant that I did a lot of communication stuff, working with man pack radios and communication vans and things like that. So there was kind of a slow motion progression. I was getting older from essentially, this one off particular activity, and then leading groups of kids. Not because I wanted leadership, but because I had an idea and other people wanted to participate, kind of thing.
Hmm.
Into eventually through the scouting movement, and then moving into the military, where I was in the Army Reserve while going to university, and so I was in that for 5 or 6 years, I think it was, and so that's sort of how it progressed. But one of the interesting things about leadership, right? I mean, of course, the military is very, very good at teaching theory of leadership. And so one of the first things that they communicate to you is that to be a good leader, you have to be a good follower. If it's your way or the highway, if it's, if what you want is power, if what you want is to make things go your way, well, that's fine, but everybody has a boss. At every level, everybody has a boss. Some people have a bigger picture than you have, and they have other things they're trying to accomplish. So if you're always trying to do it your way, and your ego's involved in everything, it doesn't work very well. So you have to learn how to work within a larger organization and then also get other people to accomplish the goals that were set upon you. In the technology world, as you move up, obviously it's not the military, nor should it be. It's a completely different structure, but the basic idea is still there. And it comes down to essentially talking to people like they're people, valuing people's contribution. And that's true in the military as well. It's not like, actually, Hollywood does a pretty decent job of showing what military life is like. And it's not the caricature that people think it is. It is very much a collaborative environment where you're working together to solve a problem. And yes, you have to take direction. Everybody does. Even I take direction. In my senior position at my company, that's not in and of itself a bad thing. That's how we accomplish bigger goals. But if you can learn how to work within an organization, so the entire organization moves forward, and you can also learn how to motivate people to do difficult things, then you start to create a differentiated working environment.
Nice. I like that. Uh, the there's this undertone of a whole bunch of the stuff that you're talking about that's all about communication. And one of the things that I've noticed in the tech world is that there's definitely uh, more comfortable communicators and people that are way less comfortable. How did you get comfortable with all that stuff? Was that ever a challenge for you?
Not really. So I'm some people are 100% technology, and that's great, and some people are excellent communicators, or they're more on the artistic side, and that's great too. You need all of these people in society to have a nice place to live. I'm one of those odd people that kind of straddles both, and that I've done quite a bit of photography. I have a good artistic eye towards things, but I also understand technology, and they're actually not that different. And some people would immediately recoil from that and say, no, zeros and ones have nothing to do with lighting a portrait. And it's like, well, true, zeros and ones have nothing to do with it. But everything about technology is balance and counterbalance. Like if you look at an SSD, for example, which is what my company does, I didn't really introduce myself. Maybe I should take a second to do that. So sorry about that, everyone. My
That's
name is
okay.
Sebastien, and I'm the Fizon Electronics CTO. Fizon is a company that's been around for 25 years. We make about 20% of the planet's SSDs. Now, for the first 20 years or so, we were primarily functioning as an OEM, sorry, an ODM, and we would make equipment for other people's labels. And we're still doing that on the client side. For the enterprise side, what we found is that there's basically 5 companies in the world that sell enterprise SSDs at scale. And so we can't really work with partners because each of those large companies also make NAND, or they're actually one or two of the cloud companies are making their own SSDs too. But the point is, there's not the same ecosystem of companies to work with. So what we did for the enterprise side is we created our own brand, um, and which is called Piscari. And it's funny when you go through like a branding discussion, there's like all this back and forth, and people are like, yeah, but it's not like everybody else's. My point to the team was it literally doesn't matter what we call it. Like if you think of an example, Optane, uh, which was a great technology. It just didn't find its niche. Actually, if Optane popped up now, it would probably do a lot better in the AI economy. But the thing about Optane as a name, it's like sounds a bit like Octane, sounds a little bit like optimal, Optimus, just optimistic. So it has a lot of connotations with it, but what does it mean? Nothing. And when it comes to branding, that is a common thing that comes up. It's like you have to pick something that's differentiated, and it's going to feel uncomfortable because it's not like everybody else's. And that's one of the reasons why we didn't go with blue or green. Those colors are heavily used in tech. We actually went with a warm yellowish orange kind of thing, and the color really stands out. And after you've seen it for a little while, it's just normal. And that's true of like Facebook. If you think about Facebook, right? Naming a product Facebook and just pull it apart from the individual words, it's weird. But now we all know what Facebook is. It is this website that everybody uses. It's super popular, so that so we came up with the name Piscari. There's a whole naming process for it. We came up with colors, we came up with graphics and things like that. And so we established a brand for our enterprise products, but we continue to support our clients based products, which are like consumer grade SSDs and things like that. So we make a lot of SSDs, and now we're actually starting to innovate new classes of SSDs. And so we'll be having some press releases about these things probably in 2026. We'll be introducing 2 new products which are very different from the type of SSDs that you see on the market today. But that's what we do, a lot of
Cool.
innovation, and I'm the Fizon CTO, and that's essentially what brought me, and you together is that you saw a little bit of my story on LinkedIn, found it interesting, and then we started talking, and you were kind enough to invite me here, which I greatly appreciate.
No, it's yeah, thank you. I appreciate the backstory also. For folks that don't know, what are SSDs
Oh,
and
so
where?
sure. So, I think most people are familiar with hard drives these days, or HDD, hard disk drive is actually what HDD stands for. SSD is solid state drive. So it's a storage mechanism, and it works kind of like in the way that hard drives are very different from tape, but they accomplish similar things for storing data. SSDs are very different from hard drives, but they still accomplish the same basic goal of having non-volatile storage. The main difference between a hard drive and SSD is that an SSD has no moving parts, no magnetic media. It's just chips, electrical charges, and retention of charges over time.
Nice, cool, thank you. Um, I expect that since we have a largely tech audience, they'll know what that is.
Yeah.
Just on the off chance that somebody who's a farmer comes in, having them understand would be awesome. Um, so the communication thing,
Mhm.
I've always found that that's a real critical success metric for leadership.
Yes.
Um, how do you help people that they look like they might be good leaders to to get to the levels that you want around being able to communicate effectively with both their teams and folks above them in the org chart?
Practice and coaching is really what it comes down to, because you can't get good at something unless you do it. And you can't really improve unless somebody says, hey, this was good. This area, is a little different. Probably one of the trickiest things to get people used to when presenting information. Actually, it applies to all groups, but typically the way people from a scientific, mathematical, and engineering background, they want to build their case. So they'll say A, B, C, D, E, and E is the conclusion. Well, when people aren't experts in that domain, understanding A, B, C, D, and E, or sorry, the first four,
Mhm.
A, B, C, D, takes a lot of effort because you kind of understand it, but not really, and you're really thinking about it. It requires a lot of focus, and you still don't know why you should care. So one of the key things is to bring that bottom line up front. I'm going to tell you about a new drive today. It changes for example, it
Yeah,
changes the way your storage appliance works and makes it substantially more efficient while also improving or, performant, while also improving the reliability and the resiliency. So we're going to walk through a couple slides, talk about how we get there, but the end goal is that this will create a product that outperforms everyone else's solution in this segment.
nice.
So you frame it.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
can
yeah.
call it bottom line up front. You can call it forward framing or whatever terminology works, but you have to give people a reason to care. Why is this relevant to me?
Right, right. Yeah. I
And
like that.
that's,
Yeah.
oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, no, I like that approach, and I like the I like the observation that about getting the "why should you care" up to the front, because that does, as you said, it frames everything else really, really effectively, and it gets people to pay attention and go, "Oh, of course, yeah, I wanna hear about this stuff," right? Yeah, that totally makes sense. Um, do you have, I I use templates all the time. Do you have templates for your people to do that kinda stuff, or
No, because I mean, if there was some, no, because everything is so different. You might be talking about one particular aspect of technology, or why we should choose method A versus method B, or why this particular supplier has a better core IP that we should pull in versus another. I mean, you could kind of, they're that's sort of what I'm thinking of off the top of my head, but what I'm trying to say is the principle is largely the same. And actually the way that I write the presentations is I kind of have, you have to have a story you want to tell, but there's also information you want to convey. And so I kind of build the presentation. And then once I put it together, I actually take my conclusion slide, which I write at the end, then move it to the front and then massage it a little bit so it's not dependent on information that hasn't been presented yet.
I like that. I like that. That's very cool.
I mean, if you can start with the conclusion, that's great. But creating a slide that has like, here's my like, I don't need, for example, to create a slide that tells me, this. Actually, there are two different techniques that I use when I'm writing when I'm writing documentation. If I'm actually creating something, which I mean could be a standard, but sometimes it's just, this is how we're going to do a secure protocol. These are the commands that we need to do and all that stuff. Yes, I will actually create sections and put placeholders as like I need to talk about this, but I'm writing this part right now,
Mhm.
so that I don't forget things. So I will put placeholders if I'm writing like a 60-page document. But if I'm presenting a presentation, usually it's sort of like I know what I want to do already, and then I have to basically take a very complex topic and then boil it down to a reasonable number of slides and not get lost in the details that don't matter until you're in a deep dive conversation.
Right, right. Cool. Thank you.
And sorry, you are asking, how do
Yeah.
I get people up to that point?
Yeah.
Examples. So you say, this is how I presented this. And then you can, for example, walk through, you presenting the information, but because it's also a teaching process, you're also saying, I presented like this because, or
Right.
when I take the graphic or the information that I'm trying to present, there's a lot of complexity. And so secondary items, I don't put them in a bold color. I will actually make them subdued, or I will use more of a script font kind of thing because there's just too much text on the slide.
Right.
Or subdued could be a lighter color, it can be a light gray, or sometimes you'll have a little asterisk that explains like the hardware configuration, but it's really not relevant to the discussion that you're having. You just
Mhm.
want to have it there for a reference when the other company or group that you're presenting it to is reviewing the slides, that's there for clarification, but it doesn't need to be front and center. So it doesn't have to be black text in the same font size. So playing with how you present information to make it balanced and appealing, drawing the eye to the elements that are important for the thing that you're trying to convey, and then making sure that you're not overloading the data. Like one of the things that I generally do all the time and tell people do this is, look, I understand there are 5 decimal places to this number that you measured. It's not relevant. In fact, you can round it up the nearest power of, nearest multiple of 50. Is it 600, 650? That's a good distinction. Telling them it's 648.973.256, it conveys kind of the same thing. And mentally, you can abbreviate that to, oh, it's like 650. But it creates a mental load when you're trying to process the information on the slide. And if you just kind of focus on what your point is, that this is better than that, all those decimal numbers don't matter for that presentation. And so it's filtering level of details.
I like that. Yeah. Yeah. Cause it takes cognitive load, which can distract you from the whole point of the presentation. If you're,
Yeah, the thing that you're trying to convey.
yeah, as you're trying to round the number in your head, I was thinking, oh my God, that's a really, like, it stops your train of thought for a minute, as your cognitive process has to go play with that number. Yeah. Yeah. And then the next consideration is in my head is why is it decimal
Matter.
math? Yeah, exactly. Right. Like for unless we're building a car motor and we're talking about thousandths of an inch of,
Well, from a design perspective, it totally matters.
yeah,
But
yeah,
when you're doing a presentation where a month's worth of research is summarized into one slide, it doesn't matter. You just
yeah,
want
yeah,
people
yeah.
to understand the directional trend.
I like that. That's cool. So when you started off in tech,
Hmm.
um, it's clear that you learned some stuff from your military service,
Hmm.
right? When you start off in tech, were you an individual contributor or did you start off? Okay.
Oh, no. I was a junior engineer just like anybody else who's just graduated university. And, because when you're in the reserves, you're not working full time. I was going to school, I was completing my degree, I was starting my job. But the information, like, one of the things that they actually teach you, depending on what you end up doing in the military, but one of the things that they teach you is how to teach. Because you often, even in the military, convey large amounts of information in a very succinct manner, and it has to be something that people can remember. And so bogging down on minutia is a good way of making sure nobody knows what they're supposed to do. If your goal was not to confuse people, but rather to unite them and move them forward towards a common objective, you got to find a better way to express yourself.
Right, right. Oh, that's interesting. That's an interesting side benefit of hiring vets
Hmm.
is that.
Yeah, a large part of military activity is understanding how to take a complex task, break it down into achievable steps, and then following up on them to make sure they get done, which is a lot of what you do in tech.
Exactly. Yeah. 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 Or lots of other kinds of.
Oh, sure, sure. I don't mean exclusively
Yeah. Yeah.
tech. I
Yeah.
just mean it's a
Yeah.
very useful life skill.
It's really it's project management, and
Yeah.
you could be building houses or
Yeah.
writing software, or building SSDs, or yeah. Um, yeah. Oh, it's interesting. Yeah. So when you start off as an individual contributor, what kind of gets you somebody's attention,
Mhm.
and they're moving you up the ranks?
From a technology perspective, it comes down to, I mean, I can't speak for like a medical perspective or something like
But
that,
for
right? I can
you,
only
like, how
speak to
did
my
the
own
path go for
experience.
you? Yeah.
Yeah. So from a technology perspective, what gets people's attention is just being really good at your job. Be good at your job, be able to retain large amounts of information, be able to provide and contribute productively in meetings, deliver assignments on time. Essentially the things that make you a good employee. Essentially fundamentally, an employee's job is to make their boss's life easier, not make it harder. And that's a very, very simplistic generalization. But to belong to an organization, you have to be doing something useful for that organization. You have to be doing it effectively, and delivering things on time. The better you are at doing that, the more value you have to the organization. But also, if you also demonstrate that you know how to talk to people and you're not condescending or a jerk or an office bully, because some people can talk great to their bosses, but they talk down to everyone else. None of those people are good for the health of the organization. So, ideally, your boss kind of gets a good sense of how you are with others, and then he or she will say, "Hey, I need somebody to drive this program. This individual is really good at the tech, and he seems to work well with others." He or she. I keep generalize to myself.
Mhm.
He or she works well with others, and so I think that this is going to work because at the end of the day, the boss is on the hook for delivering the whole solution. You're on the hook for delivering your part of the solution. And the last thing the boss wants to do is to get people in charge of things that they will not deliver on, because then that reflects back on them, and then so on and so forth. So
Yep.
everybody's trying to, it's an optimization problem, if you will. You could also call it a greedy algorithm in computer science terms, or an optimize I forget, sorry, I might be repeating myself. An optimization greedy algorithm is, you could also even see it as self-serving. It's like, it's bad for me if I put bad people in charge, so I'm gonna put good people in charge.
Yeah. Yeah.
There are multiple ways of looking at it, but I tend to see it more from the positive perspective, which is to say, ultimately, I want to deliver something to my internal or external customers. And in doing so, I want to pick the people that have the right skill set and have a good attitude and have delivered, ideally, have a history of being able to deliver this kind of work, because then we all win in the end.
Right. Uh, um, the thing you're talking about there, the greedy algorithm, that in human terms, I think of it as enlightened self-interest.
Sure. Yeah.
Um, and I remember reading that term in a book somewhere decades ago, and at the time being like, oh, like, that's like the explanation of it. I was like, oh, that's really smart. I need to incorporate that everywhere and teach my kids,
Yeah.
and really get them to wrap their heads around it, because it's not a that idea of enlightened self-interest isn't part of the standard narrative. Like, people just don't talk about that.
True. Yeah.
Human application of a greedy algorithm is not a normal
It
normal.
doesn't sound very good for sure. It's like,
Yeah,
what?
yeah, but
Greedy? That's like a sin,
yeah.
right? And
But then once you start to break it down, you start to really understand it. You go like,
yeah,
"Oh, wait a minute, hang on now." It starts to make a lot of sense. And I think, especially, nowadays, where nobody's guaranteed lifetime employment by any company,
yeah,
and even if they are, getting to whatever level they want is also not guaranteed. You gotta be thinking, okay, how do I take care of myself effectively, my immediate family effectively, my community effectively, and you got to take care of yourself effectively first. Otherwise, the rest of it doesn't. You can't take care of them if you can't take care of yourself.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good one. So, the first team that you started running, how big was it? What was it like? What were some of the challenges?
Thinking. I think it was about 4 or 5 people, and what was interesting was, I had come up with the technology, and I got my first patent on it. It's really, really interesting. It has to essentially, I created a device that follows all of the rules of networking, but ignores the implicit assumptions and focuses on what the specification actually says. Which is weird. Like, it's been a long time, so I don't remember the details. But what it came, and obviously I won't dive into that. But
Yeah.
what it really meant was, it's kind of like, I can come up with a simple, like, for example, at one point, we had received a specification from another group within the company, and it was this security thing. And it basically said, you're expected to do A, B, C, and D within a very tight time frame. But when I read the spec, I realized only the last step was the only gating item. And so it doesn't really matter how you do steps A, B, and C, as long as they're all done before step D, and you meet the final timing for step D. Even though they put timings for all the other ones, they were not really relevant. It was just an over specification. And so by
Mm,
focusing on the parts that mattered, we were able to make something that was actually substantially more efficient than if we'd followed every prescribed step.
nice.
But sorry, I don't think I answered your question. I went off on this
Yeah,
tangent.
no,
So,
no,
oh, yeah, yeah. So
yeah.
anyways, the patent that I came up with was really interesting. It's the first time that I'd done one, because I was still pretty junior at the point. But I'm the one who invented the technology. And so at this point, the company thought that it had some value, and they wanted to do more. And I needed help. I needed more people. So they took some people that were available, because it was a very cross-functional kind of group with everyone having a lot of different skills. And so I now had about, I think I said, 4 people reporting. Most of them were older than me, but they were willing to take input from this junior guy, because I was smart, I was
Mhm.
approachable, I was pleasant to work with, and they found the technology interesting, and so it went well. But and one of the things that you also learn going back to the military is that different types of people need different motivators for getting them to work. And one of the things that
Mm,
you have to remember when you're dealing with very, very intelligent people is that they have to understand why. If you just say, do this, it's like, okay, there are 7 things that and you see this in technology a lot. There's like 2 ways of doing something. Neither of them are right or wrong. They just optimize for different things. 2 is an example. It could be 5. Doesn't matter. So there's like, you have an A B choice. And if you know what the bigger picture is, then you can make choices along the way that align with the overall objective. Um, and if you think about it from military terms, it's funny because I rarely talk about the military, but now it's coming up so many times in this conversation.
that's totally fine.
Um,
Yeah.
but if you think about it in military terms, there's something that you want to achieve, and there will be, the other side is going to have an opinion. They're going to have a vote on whether or not that thing gets achieved. And they're going to throw up roadblocks. And so if the group understands what it is that you want to do, they will be able to quickly adapt to the situation and still strive towards that goal.
Right.
And the same thing applies to technology. Customers or different internal or external customers will give you feedback. They generally know what they want to achieve. They generally don't know enough to specify exactly how to do it. And even if they did, they don't necessarily understand all of the other interdependencies that you have to work around. So when you're dealing with really, really smart people, if you kind of talk down to them, then they'll give you exactly what you asked for, and it probably won't work. But they'll say, look, these are the specifications. This is what I implemented. I think the problem's on you. Whereas if you get people on your side, believing in the goal and striving towards it, then everybody is making small corrections along the way so that you get to your destination on time. And it actually does what people wanted it to do. And it also avoids bad behaviors that they didn't even know not to specify. Like, we want this, but we don't want to do this. And this would be not okay. Like, for example, um, just to give you an idea, right? Like, a blink is about 200 to 400 milliseconds, and depending on the person and how quickly you're blinking. But when we talk about computer and technology stuff, and we're saying, hey, this is going to be 3 microseconds and this is going to be 7 microseconds. And somebody will say, my God, this doubles the time. It's now from 3 to 6 microseconds. And everybody starts to worry about like 100% performance degradation. Then you realize your target, the thing that's interacting with you is not another computer system, it's a human. And an eye
Yeah,
blink is 400 milliseconds. You can delay a little bit. Going from 3 to 6 microseconds is kind of irrelevant
yeah.
to the application.
Right, right. Oh, that's so funny. It's the cognitive thing between relative and absolute numbers
Yeah.
that you're talking about here. And I saw an article recently. They were talking about statistics and how people people will put statistics out there and they'll talk
Yeah.
about, oh my God, this thing doubled. But then you look at the actual number and you're like, exactly the point you're making, right?
Doesn't matter.
Yeah, it really doesn't matter. Yeah, 6 milliseconds is really fast, and
It
we
is.
can
Now,
lose.
if we're talking about control systems for, something that's doing, either in a plane or a car, right? Like microseconds matter. They totally
Right,
matter.
right,
But if we're interacting at the scale at which the system can perceive change is relatively speaking very limited.
right,
We process on tenth of a second kind of, like your eye perceives animation at 12 frames per second, if I remember correctly. It's not great animation, but you will actually see continuous motion. 24 frames per second is much better. But the point is, that's the frame at which, the rate at which we can perceive
right,
change in
right,
the best case scenario. So once you understand what your target system needs, then you focus on optimizing what matters, and the things that don't matter, you can make a trade off and say, look, this thing that does matter, I can actually make it a little bit better if I sacrifice this. And sure, it's twice as slow, but it's irrelevant because it's not in the critical path for the overall flow of the system. And so understanding what it is that you're trying to do, having people that are focused on the end objectives, and then they're using their vast, yeah, because everybody has a ton of experience. So when you give people enough tools to understand what it is that they're trying to achieve, then they can make all those decisions without you having to have meeting after meeting after
right,
meeting. And then everybody's seeking your input, and then you become the long pole in the scheduling. And it's not
right.
good. You won't keep your job long if that's how you run things.
Yeah, no, I like that. Yeah, it's interesting because the your experience is very different from my first team. Um, I I was at a startup, and the founder of the
Mhm,
and I was I think I was the third employee, maybe second,
mhm.
and and I was the guy that was coding. And then and as things were progressing, they were like, "You need to build a team. Go build a team."
Yeah,
And I had a horrible social. I had social anxiety at the time also, but I
sure.
had really bad imposter syndrome.
Oh,
um,
yeah,
because I was new to coding. I'd been coding for like 18 months at that point in time. And the the first person I hired was a computer science major, uh, magna cum laude, I think, out of Berkeley.
okay,
Mm. And he double majored in computer science and business. And,
okay.
like phenomenally intellectual,
Yeah,
powerful, right? He's been writing code for like 10 years. And I was like, "Oh my God, this kid can write circles around me. I need to make sure that nothing slows him down." And then he brought three of his friends that all to interview, all of whom I hired. And so I had this whole team of way better than me coders.
sure.
And I was like, okay, I just need to make sure that whatever I can do to make their lives go well, I do.
Yeah,
Um,
and that's a
and
fundamental principle of leadership right there is, you're there to enable your team.
yeah, yeah. And so I very clearly got that these guys could all code circles around me, and I just needed to like provide the why, kind of the high level guidance. Here's why we're doing this. This is what the customers need. Basically, I was doing product management in addition to everything else. Um, and and let them run as fast as they possibly could. It's kind of like go to town.
Yeah.
And it worked amazingly well.
Mhm,
I was uh I was almost never the smartest person in the room. Um and I was totally I didn't even care about that. I was like,
mhm.
This is the feature we need to build. This is the problem the customers have. These are the things that matter. Um, I tried to be very generous with the specs, um, because I didn't want them to like. I would rather have them go, "Hey, what do you mean by this? Like, what do you think the clients want?" And like underspec it rather than overspec.
Yes.
You know, um, because their
Yeah.
questions were really really good. And I'd be like, "Oh, I hadn't thought about that way before. Let me go talk to the stakeholders and whoever and get back to you." Because we haven't talked about that level of detail, but that kind of became my MO.
Sure.
Um, and uh, but yeah, it's totally different from being the guy that's got the patent with the team. It's completely
Oh, no, that's one particular event, at you asked the beginning,
yeah,
but
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
not always the person who has the technology in his head, though often I am because I'm saying, "Hey, we're gonna do this, it's a different algorithm," and then I have to give them enough information that I can implement it. But the key thing when you're in an architectural role, a technology architectural role is you don't over specify unless it's super, super important. Like, if an algorithm has to work a very specific way, otherwise it doesn't work, sure, go into flow diagrams and show all of that. But generally, try not to, because the people who are working on it will generally have a better understanding of how to make it efficient and optimal. And so if you don't have to spec something, don't. Um, and it's a balancing act, right? And you get better at it as you get feedback from other people. One of the other things that I've always done from the beginning is if somebody reads my spec and they ask a question, I assume that there are 10 other people who have the same question but haven't asked it. Because
mm,
most people don't want to look dumb, and I don't mean that they are dumb. It's just this perception of not understanding something and then having other people see that you don't understand it must mean that you are, again, quoting dumb.
sure,
And
sure,
and so there's this natural desire not to want to speak up. So if somebody did, I just automatically assume it's not clear. I can make it better. And there's probably, three or four other people who also don't understand it. Whereas, sometimes you run across somebody and they push back and go, well, it's clear because it's, clearly stated and there's all these bullet points. It's like, maybe so, but it's not clear to them and they're the one who's doing the work. So make it clear to them.
yeah, yeah. No, I like that, and I like the deliberateness of the communication. Like we're going to communicate to this level because we want flexibility.
Yeah.
We don't want anybody to feel boxed in.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I did. Yeah, I think I get scared um, when people try to they want to make sure that nobody can come back and they're afraid of being asked questions.
Hmm.
And because they're back to your point a minute ago, they're afraid of being thought of as dumb, right?
Mhm.
Because they didn't specify whatever the heck it
Oh,
happened
yeah.
to be, right? And that that makes me nervous for two reasons. Number one, it means that the person writing the specs doesn't have as much self-confidence as I would like them to have,
Yeah.
and as much comfort that they're fine, even as a human being, right?
Yeah.
Um, but also it reduces the creativity of the folks that are
Yes.
actually and they may have a better idea,
Often they do.
which and I've seen that so many times where again, like I don't want to be the smartest guy in the room because I keep seeing other people having ideas. I'm like, oh my god, that's way better than anything I was thinking of. Yes, that. Um, and so I want them to have the flexibility, the freedom, the creativity to put that better idea in there.
Mhm.
And it always makes me nervous when I look at things. I'm like, there's too much. There's too many bullet points in here
Yeah.
and too much detail. And I I I want my team to have more flexibility. Like it's like I push back on that. I'm like,
Yeah.
if someone has a better idea here, can we do something different?
Sure. And
Uh,
that I remember I once came up with this, like, overly complicated way of, like, estimating a number, and then somebody else had, like, this super simple function. I'm like, "Yeah, that's way better than mine. I like your version better." And I don't
exactly. Yeah.
normally make things
Yeah.
overly complicated, but that one, that's how I thought through the problem. And then they were
Right.
like, yeah, but if we just kind of do this, it's much simpler and it's also correct. I'm like, yes, it is also correct and
Y
much, much better.
yeah, yeah, way less server load when you go that way. Yeah, yeah. No, I think that's one of those lessons that, that um, if we're if we're willing to to just hear what the people to like hear input and be coachable ourselves, and then someone has a better idea, we're like, oh, that's so much better than what I was thinking. It goes back to self confidence.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
you have to have self confidence to be coachable,
Mhm. True.
and um, back to the military thing. I
Mhm.
think because there's so much there is. So I grew up on military bases.
Okay.
My I lived on military bases till I was 14. And my dad ran supply chain for munitions.
Mhm.
Um, and he always talked about how his job was to help his teams, and they often had better ideas than he did about how to make things work better. You know, and that always stuck in my head as, oh, okay, well, that's really good to know. I always want that to be available for them, and he was being coached, like, even though he was the boss, they were coaching him on better ways to do stuff,
Yep.
right? And I always stuck in my head as, oh, I need to be always do that. And then I gripped in competitive sports, and so I had coaches that were always, either large or small tweaks to improve what I was doing.
Right.
Um, and I just think that's always the the willingness to do that is such a uh it's an enlightened self-interest because you get to
Mhm.
be better without emotional friction,
Yep.
and emotional friction, I think, gets in the way of people improving.
Yes.
Yeah.
Also, when you're dealing with really smart people, which you of course want, because then that allows the team to be more productive. But really smart people don't like doing stupid stuff. They don't like doing stuff inefficiently just cause. Now, sometimes you just got to, I mean, there's a balancing act there. But they also get bored, and you don't want them getting bored. You want them using that energy not to find things to amuse themselves, but to actually, for example, make the product better.
Right.
So if you give them an overly specified thing, one, you may have made some mistakes, and then it may be inconsistent. And if they feel like they have no sense of ownership because they can't change anything, they're just gonna kind of whip out that task and say, I'm done. Whereas if you kind of say, this is what we're trying to do, I'm not gonna tell you how to do it. That's up to you. And you're balancing a bunch of different things. And then you're gonna potentially find areas of improvement, and that's great. Like they have to feel that they have a sense of ownership, they take a sense of pride in what they're doing, they're trying to make their best work possible, and then you recognize them for their effort. You don't just say, thank you for completing the task. Completing the task was the expectation, therefore you meet requirements. Here's your 3 out of 5. You're a terrible leader. You will find that people do not spend time or invest time in the relationship with you or the projects that you direct. I mean, technically, everything that I said was correct, but that is not how you motivate people.
Right. Right. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of intrinsic motivation, and and yeah, I think that's another reason to not do the overspec is giving them the creativity and the ownership of, here's how we're gonna solve this particular thing. Um, and I get that for some people that's probably uncomfortable
For sure.
because they want control. I
Yep.
I don't have, I'm more, I don't need that level of control.
Self
And
confidence.
yeah, well, yeah, yeah. I mean, you know, I've hired smart people, right? Like,
Yeah.
I know they're smart most of the time. Every now and then I get it wrong, but
Sure.
they're smart. They they know how to do this stuff. I want them to have exciting challenges.
Sure.
And
Yep. It keeps them motivated, keeps them
yeah,
interested, gives them a sense of ownership, sense of pride, makes
yeah,
them want to get up in the morning.
yeah, exactly. And and so even when there's there's been times when I've been like, okay, I'm uncomfortable because I feel like something is um way way outside of my control space, right? S- Despite the fact that I've been super uncomfortable about that multiple times, it's never gone badly, you know? Um, or if it has gone badly, we've been able to solve the problem and it hasn't been the end of the world. Um, and like, okay, like you're not going to win all the time. You know, I'm certainly, we're going to have failures and stuff's not going to work and servers are going to overload and stuff's not going to work the way we thought it would. And okay, great. That's the game, you know?
Or you're going to have the third best product on the market. It's not a bad
Exactly.
product. It's
Right.
just the third best. Now, of course, you don't want that. You want the best product,
Right.
but that's not going to happen every time either.
Right.
The
Exactly.
question is, then you focus on what are the value propositions for my product. Sure, this metric, it's not the best, but on these metrics, it's really good. And then you
Right.
got to steer your product towards a market that values those three metrics.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Have you read Rework by Jason Fried?
No, I'm sorry, I haven't.
Oh, it's really good about you build the product, you that kind of dance back and forth of, we're building a product for this market, and he's a big fan of your product stick with that market, like really get really good
Sure.
um, at at um the market fit,
Hmm.
and and don't he's funny. He's like, we're not adding features for the next level up of the marketplace because it's a whole different product.
Yeah.
And we are making a ton of money right where we are, and we're really trying to hone in on this. Like, we're the third best product, but that's okay because there's a third of the marketplace that we're exactly what they want. And
Yeah.
that's a
We have
huge amount of money.
100% of that third of the slice instead of 10% of three slices. It's,
Exactly. Yeah. And I'm like,
well, that kind of balances out, but
yeah,
it usually doesn't.
usually it doesn't. Right. Right. But yeah, but and they're doing really well with that focus, which I think is genius.
Yeah.
Um, and, but yeah, you're not gonna win all the time. That's the way it goes. Um, within your current context, um, do you guys? I'm always curious about internal training.
Mhm.
Um, what kind of leadership training or coaching or whatever you want to call it do you guys do internally? Is it do you have like a system, or is it more ad hoc, or kind of how do you do that?
I'm thinking of the couple different companies I've worked for. Some companies have had a training process and it actually wasn't bad. What they would typically do is bring in consultants that specialize in leadership training. They didn't necessarily try to do it in-house because it's quite a specialized skill. And that was okay. Um, but often it's ad hoc, in that you kind of coach people along the way. Um, Different companies optimize different things, so I can say in general it tends towards ad hoc. um yeah, even, I mean, and some companies have very strict, processes for, oh, you're now at a leadership level, you do this and this, and they will do that as long as the times are good. And then when
Mm.
when the market crunches down, all that stuff stops. So, I'm not saying it's good or bad. I find those sessions can be very valuable. But I find personally that it's kind of like the difference between book learning and doing. In that, sure, it'll give you, if you don't know those concepts already and you're being introduced to new concepts, that can be really helpful. And if you're the kind of person who takes it to heart and tries to build on that, that's great. Um, Not everybody's like that, but that doesn't really matter. Like, I mean, it's good for introducing new concepts, but at the end of the day, you have to apply it. And you can get much of that if you don't have the budget for the specialized external training. You can get much of that by, being aware of who works well with other people, and you see how they present, how they do things, and then asking them, "Hey, you're pretty good at this. Would you be willing to, explain to people how you think through this problem?" Um, and that can also be just as effective.
I like that. I like that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That part of what that specifically calls out is that you have to have a level of awareness of how your team is operating beyond just the superficial to see that, oh yeah, this person's really good with people because leadership really is a people thing, not a,
Mhm.
not the technology thing as much. Um, and and then how do you do that? How do you break that down? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I've always been fortunate that I work in areas that I'm interested in and that I'm good at. So I've been, you were asking me how did I get a start? It's like, well, I was really good and then I kind of moved up. But that's not the only path you can take. There's also some excellent leaders. They're not the technology experts, but they do understand how to balance risk and they do understand how to motivate people and they understand how to you know keep a project moving forward, keeping track of things. So while they can't necessarily do, um, they probably couldn't do the work without their team, they can effectively lead a team of very smart people um, because they have all the proper attributes of leadership. Now,
Right.
it's always better if your leader's like, really good at the technology. But if you have a choice between somebody who's really good at technology but bad at leadership, and then somebody who's okay at the technology, is competent in the domain but really good at leadership, that's the person you probably want leading the team, not the
Yeah.
jerk who talks down to people.
Right. Right. Yeah. I was just thinking the somewhere I ran across the analogy of being uh, the musher on a dog sled and
Mm,
making sure all the dogs are going the same direction and that they're all fed at night and they're all
yeah.
taken care of. And the people that do the Iditarod race
Mhm.
the best mushers in there, they take care of their teams the best.
Yeah.
And none of those mushers could run that race by themselves. You know,
No.
that's the
Yeah, yeah.
you know that's
It'd be
kind of the
impossible, it's
yeah
like that's a good
right
point.
right. You need that. Like yeah, they could go a mile or two, but they couldn't do the whole thing without the dogs. And
Yeah.
so you really need to be able to have that balance of caretaking and understanding the context and the environment and what you're doing and how to take care of your dogs and all that stuff. Um, and I think that's a I don't think enough people wrap their heads around that.
No.
And when you're
Yeah.
thinking about that, like I know that for me, my path has been I understand the technology well enough, but I've always hired people better than me at writing code, right?
Yeah, it's usually a
And
good path.
yeah, and my forte has been figuring out what the heck it is that we should be building,
Sure.
you know, and and I do a lot of proactive outreach to external stakeholders to figure out, or internal stakeholders too, to figure out what it is that we should be working on, but it hasn't made it through the normal um, corporate infrastructure of knowledge. Like I'm a huge fan of back channeling
Sure.
um, because I get to find out that, oh, wait a minute, the sales team is struggling and has been for 2 years because customers keep asking for this, or prospects keep asking for this thing because we don't have it. They don't come to, they don't give us money.
Yeah.
Like, we need to help the sales team out. How hard will it be to add this feature and will it break anything? You
Yeah.
know, and be able to talk because that kind of stuff rarely comes down through the executives. And so, whether it's sales team or it's customer support or it's finance, or, like I'll talk to customers and they'll say, hey, could you guys ever think about doing blah, 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 Um, and even if I end up having to come back and say no, I may get 10 people that ask for the same thing. And after the 10th one, I may say, okay, yeah, we should do it because
Yeah.
the statistics on this are suddenly going up a lot. And what I thought was just this weird outlier singleton. Now I'm realizing, oh, wait, there's a bunch more, and so that's always been my thing is to go and, to do that.
Yeah.
Uh, and
And
that,
and to pay attention to the
okay.
things that are I'm so sorry, please.
Oh no,
I
it's
typically
just
talk
it's a
over you.
different skill set. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. You're about to say it's a. What were you saying?
I was about to say that you want to pay attention to the things that you're hearing and find the patterns. They're not always 100% the same, but you're gonna kind of realize these two are relatively close, and I can meet a solution that meets both of them. And now I have two potential lead customers for this feature. And so once I see that pattern, I'll kind of say, "Hey, we could build this. It meets your needs. What do you think? Is this interesting?"
Yeah,
And and then you give them space to think about it and then to decide if they want to do it. We were talking a little bit, well, throughout the whole conversation, we've been talking about team culture. One of the things that I think is important to mention in this conversation is the idea of one, creating a safe space to be wrong,
yeah,
and for people to understand, hey, I thought this would work this way. It doesn't. Um, and obviously, I mean, there are ways to mitigate that. You do proof of concepts, you do kind of, minimum, what do they call it? Minimum VIP, minimum
minimum viable product.
viable product.
I've done that a
Oh,
lot.
MVP, minimal viable
MVP. Yeah,
product.
yeah.
There's lots of ways of mitigating that, but eventually a mistake will be made,
Right,
or an understanding of the market will change. And the thing is, you don't want to create this culture of fear. You really want people to feel comfortable coming to you so that once you have the information, then you can take corrective action. But until you have the information, you can't. But not only
right,
that, if people don't want to come to you or they kind of dilute it so that it doesn't look like they're really responsible, and so you don't have the all the full information, then let you only have half, a portion. Then you make a plan based on the information you have, not realizing that there are two other things which would completely change your plan if you knew them. And if people don't trust you to be able to
right,
tell you, hey, this isn't working, here's the reason, this is where we're having friction, this person is difficult, that doesn't mean that you go yell at that person, but you try to understand why there is this friction. They may have a very, very valid reason for being, but you don't know it. And so the more people are comfortable talking to you, the more people feel they can trust you to tell you the truth, even if it doesn't make them look good, the more likely you are to be able to solve the problem in a way that works for the organization and for the people involved, potentially removing some friction points between groups, for example.
right, right. Yeah, I'm a huge proponent of building environments of psychological safety.
Hmm.
Um, and I put a lot of time and effort into making that happen. I'm very systematic about it.
Yeah.
Because I've seen, to your point, when people feel psychologically safe, they will say, "Hey, I thought this was going to be the great thing, but it's not. We need to course correct somehow or other." But the other part about that is getting people who are not as comfortable speaking up
Hmm.
to feel comfortable speaking up.
Yep.
And because I've noticed that when I do that, they have great ideas
Hmm.
that go unspoken
Yeah.
until we've made the environment such a way that they are comfortable speaking up, right? And going, "Oh, I know everybody's talking about X, but have we thought about doing it like Y?" Right? And then everybody goes, "Oh, wow, that's so much better." Right?
Yeah.
And so I think just from an overall team performance,
Sure.
yeah, metric, um, I focus on getting the quiet people to be comfortable
Yep.
enough to speak up, because the folks that are confident, kind of more extroverted, they're going to speak up all the time anyway,
Yeah.
right? And it's the quiet ones that I'm like, "Well, I wonder what they're thinking. What's going on in the back of their head?" Um and I noticed that when the quiet ones are contributing, that everybody else feels more comfortable. It's like that's kind of the canary in the coal mine thing for me, is when they feel more comfortable, everybody else feels more comfortable.
Sure.
And then we get, well, one, people will come out with ideas that they're not 100% sure of.
Hmm.
And it's kind of vulnerable to go, I kind of have this idea, but I'm not really sure if it'll work. And then other people could go, oh, wait a minute. Yes, it totally makes sense because blah, blah, blah. Or they can riff on it, right?
Hmm.
Or we may go, yeah. here's 3 reasons why that won't. And they're like, "Oh, that's a good point. Okay, yeah, forget it. Okay." But having them say it, um, if it doesn't come out, we can't have a conversation,
Yeah.
and I want
And
to.
they may have a path, like a path of intuition, which,
Yeah.
like you said, they haven't fully, or maybe they don't have the background to fully flesh it out, but they're seeing something that it seems like that would be the right way to go, whatever the decision is. And the fact that they can put the whole group on that path of intuition, and essentially, I'm sort of I didn't
Yeah.
realize I would, but I'm basically paraphrasing what you said, which is, you now have the whole group contributing, and nobody else had that path of intuition, but now the group can explore the idea and decide, yes, it makes sense. No, it doesn't.
Right.
Um, Related to that, which when you brought it up, it's like, yeah, I I've always done that as well. I want not necessarily like go around the circle. Do you have an idea? Do you have an idea?
Right,
But
right, right.
rather,
Yeah.
as the conversation is going on, you might like call someone out and go, hey, and you try to find, knowing what you know about them, a way to bring them into the conversation. Like, you're working on this from your perspective, whatever this particular section of the solution is, how does this seem to you? Or can you think of a way to do it? And then you want to give them permission to not know. It's like sometimes I don't, and I'll just make those statements about myself. I'll
Yep.
say sometimes I don't know. Sometimes I have a feeling, but I can't really completely. I don't have enough information yet to make a yes no decision. And I think it could be really beneficial to hear your perspective. And that sort of gives them permission to not know, permission to take a risk, but it also tells everybody else they might not know and shut up. Don't dog on them just because they didn't have the complete answer, kind of thing.
Right, right,
Um, I mean, without having to say it, right? You're giving the group permission to accept incomplete information, and their ego, and you're basically saying your ego does not have to get involved. And then there are the cases of the quiet people, but then there are the people that are just a little abrasive, a little too loud, a little too forthcoming, a little speak too strongly. And, it's okay to moderate that without making them feel bad, because that doesn't help either.
right,
And you're basically just saying, and then there's a lot, I mean, obviously it's context dependent, but you would say something along the lines of, you're bringing up some excellent points, but let's see what the rest of the group thinks. I don't saying that you're wrong. I'm saying sometimes having multiple perspectives can present a better solution. And you try to frame it in such a way. And my boy, I have a boy, a son, and he's about 9 right now. And one of the things that he's super confident. And so one of the things that I'm trying to teach him is, when you're being polite, you're adding a lot of words. Your explanation gets quite a bit longer, and you've already figured it out. You already have the answer. You can say, it's this, blah, and just spit it out. And you are correct, but it shuts the conversation down. So, the way that I present information is I actually put pauses in my speech and deliberately act unsure, just to not put people off, because it's like, this is the answer. But if I say that, then they feel dumb, and I don't want them to feel dumb. And it shuts the conversation down. So I'll say, well, I think, based on what I've looked at, I've got a feeling that this is the direction that, we should go in based on this information. What do you think? And it's not to say that I'm going into that conversation with my mind made up, but instead of saying, oh, it's this, and then trying to get the conversation going, I add a lot more words to kind of soften the statement and make
right.
it inviting for somebody else to join. And so that's being aware of how you come across when you're too confident for your own good or for the team's own good, kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I like that. I like that approach. And I've certainly used one-on-ones
Yep.
to coach people.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. There's room for one-on-one, but
Yeah,
sometimes something has to, because it's a group context, it has
yeah,
to be done there in a proper way.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I think the biggest lever for company productivity is always getting the individual contributors to operate better,
Mhm.
which translates to getting their team leads to operate better at helping the team operate better. And a founder that I worked for years ago, pointed that out to me. That
That's true.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he said, because one day I was really struggling because um I was afraid to ask him for help with something.
Uh-huh.
And I finally said that, and he was like, "No, no, no, you misunderstand. It's my job to make you successful. Like, whatever you need to come ask me for it." And I was like, "Really?" And he's
Yeah.
like, "Yeah, because the people that are doing all the work is your team. Like, they're making the product that we're selling, right?
Yeah.
And so anything you can do to help make them operate better, I should be saying yes to if it makes any business sense at all.
Yeah,
And he's like, for the sales team, it's the same way. Peter runs a sales team, and anything that I can do to help the team operate better, I'm going to do. Like, you just need to come ask me for it. And I was like, oh, okay. And that took away a huge amount of fear for me.
yeah,
Um, and I would go and ask him like, hey, can we, get blah, blah, blah. And we'd go through what's the business case? How is this going to help them be more productive? And, and then ultimately I flipped that around to a template that I use from then on to present to executives whenever I want anything for my teams.
sure.
And it worked really, really well. Yeah.
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 Related to that idea, there's another realization that I had, I don't know, 10, probably 20 years ago. It's going to sound a little backwards and a little bit weird, but it worked for me in my own brain. And the thing that I realized is I'm at least as dumb as that other guy over there, which is weird because it sounds like I'm putting somebody down, right? But what I mean to say is we're probably equally, and again, that's how my brain worked. And when I phrased it that way to me, it made me not feel guilty about it. But
Mm,
if I kind of rephrase it in a way that'll make sense to like people in general, I would say, you know, in most people are, at least of equivalent intelligence as everybody else in the group in different ways. Like you might not be a master of, I don't know, medical terminology, but you're really good at accounting. That doesn't mean that the medical terminology person is smarter than you. You just have different areas of expertise. And
right.
the
Right.
same is true for technology, Rust versus C++ or whatever. And so by essentially realizing that, sure, I don't know everything, and sometimes I don't know how to do something, but I'm not a stupid person, and I'm not a lazy person. I try to understand things, but I'm stuck. It's okay to ask for help. And
Yep.
and you can know that, but sometimes like a weird train of thought will unlock the real meaning of that statement. So I realize it's hard to follow. I'm at least as dumb as that guy over there. It's very pejorative, but that gave me permission to not be ashamed for not knowing something.
Right.
And
Right.
so, and in meetings, one of the things that I want the team to understand is, I don't know. I mean, I know a lot, but I don't know everything.
Right.
And especially in this area that you have been working on for the last 6 months, or this new version of the standard that I have not studied because I don't have the time, I don't know.
Right.
But I do understand how to balance things. I do understand how to mitigate risk, and I do understand how to leverage other people's expertise. But I also don't walk in with the presumption that I know everything, and I make it clear that I don't know everything. And I make it, I want it to be a safe space to say, I don't know, but I'll look into it.
I like that. Um, you've mentioned the word risk multiple times,
Yeah,
I'm a huge fan of taking risks.
sure.
I may be um more towards the risk taking end of the spectrum. Um,
I'm super aggressive, but
yeah. Um,
yeah,
Good, awesome, because that may be, how you got to where you are, right? How do
partially.
you how do you help people who are risk averse get more comfortable with it?
I mean, that's a pretty common personality trait for people in the engineering technology field. You generally want more certainty. And the other thing that you run into is people always want to keep as much margin on their side as possible. And typically they give conservative estimates and they hope that they will, exceed them kind of thing. But the problem is that if you start with super low conservative estimates and then you try to pitch your idea to find lead customers and your product is very underwhelming, you will find zero lead customers. And so it's like, sure, I guarantee that I will beat these specs. Yeah, but your specs suck. It's like,
Right.
but they'll be better. It's like, well, then show me that you have confidence that they will be better. But the way that you kind of, overcome that hump, and this is a cultural thing, right? But
Right.
at the end of the day, you want to come up with a set of experiments that you can do, or simulations, emulations, or proxies. In other words, we can't collect the real data until we have the real product. But we know these are very similar, and we know there's about a 10% difference. So between the two based on a process node or something like that. Technology, the next chip technology. And so, and we don't know for sure that it'll be at 10%, but if we look at the last 3 or 4 generations, it's been about 10% per hop. And there's no specific information coming in to make me believe that it would be higher or lower. It's a risk. It is a risk. But you kind of come up with the numbers and then you ask yourself, what are the things that would make it not possible to achieve this number? And then you have a group discussion and bring in everybody's sort of point of view and expertise and say, how can we come up with a realistic estimate? Not the highest number we can conceive of that isn't obviously false. That's not a very smart way to do it, but rather, how can we come up with something that we believe is achievable? And how can we get a sense of confidence that it is possible to achieve it? And so then you look at proof of concepts, staging device, and things like we can, and for example, you might not know in a complex system what the flow is for all of the commands that happen when it's running at full speed. But you can look at something similar and say, all of these steps have to happen. So do we have confidence that we have enough compute power, for example, to do all of these steps? And then you try to find ways to prove to yourself that, yes, we will be okay. But you do have to do investigations. Um, and it doesn't mean that you have to spend like 6 months doing investigation, because part of all of that is how can we get that information with the least possible effort possible? Um, but the information is still good. It's not
Right,
just a
right.
coin flip kind of thing. So you need to collect the information quickly, and you need to come up with things that touch all the bases that can be implemented relatively easily, um, and then that you believe that the numbers that are produced are representative. So it's a huge balancing act, and there's a bit of an art to kind of developing those strategies, but that's how you do it.
Oh,
Or that's
okay.
how I do it, anyways.
Yeah, yeah. No, that totally makes sense. Um, and as you're talking, I'm realizing the because you're in hardware,
Hardware and software, firmware.
firmware, yeah.
And
Um,
now we're doing software like Linux and stuff like that.
okay, yeah, yeah. The I don't know that the super MVP lean startup methodologies would. I'm not sure they would work in your environment.
What do you mean by that?
So like one of the examples, so Eric Ries wrote a book called Lean Startup, and it's about what is you start with this very um like a hypothesis about customer value,
Mhm,
right? The classic example is that they use in the book, or one of the ones that stick in my head is cars.com.
mhm.
And the hypothesis was people will buy cars online.
Sure.
That was the fundamental hypothesis, right?
Right.
And they were like, "Well, how do we prove that, right? What do we do?" And they said, "Well, we can put up uh, a a website really quickly and easily that has." Um, I think it was the starting point was what's the most popular car in America today, and I want to say it was Toyota Corollas at the time.
Sounds familiar, yeah.
And so they put up this super basic website. They ran some ads to get people to come there to buy a Toyota Corolla online. They had no fulfillment, right? They just come here and you can order a car, right? And they said we're going to run it for 24 hours and see what we get. Like, and then I think their metric was if we got 5 orders in 24 hours, then we know it works. We'll shut it down, and then we'll go to the next step, which is actually talking to dealers about this and figuring out the pricing model, right? And they sold 8 cars in like 6 hours and shut it off because every car they sold was 100% loss because they had no deals with anybody and they were selling for retail. And so, they had to get the car, buy it at retail and then get it delivered to the customer somewhere, right? So, every customer they got was $10,000 negative, I'm sure, to get all that stuff to happen, right?
Sure, yeah.
But they proved their initial hypothesis,
Right.
right? Um,
That was sort of aligned with what I was saying, the
yeah, yeah,
minimum experiment that will prove your point that you have confidence actually means something.
yeah, yeah.
But is there more to it?
I so every time, the stuff that I've looked at around lean or even, agile, it's always there's a hypothesis. What's the minimum thing we can do? How do we test it?
Mhm.
Uh, you know, whether it's a performance thing or it's
Mhm.
is this functional for
Mhm.
um the audience? Like years ago, I was at a company, and w- we wanted to do a complete re-architecture of a set of internal tools that 400 people in the company used. And we um we built a um 100% browser based functional clickable prototype, um that we could actually have all the operators use, and it acted like the real thing, although there was no real database in the back end. It was all right
Sure.
there in your browser, right? And that was kind of the minimum thing we could build to test with the audience, and then get all their feedback, and then go to the executives and go, hey, guess what? We want to completely change all this fundamental stuff that we've been doing. And yes, by the way, we've done all the homework. Here's all the feedback from all the people that really care about it. Right. Um, and it took us less than a week to build a prototype. Um, and then another week to get a statistically significant number of people to use it. Way more than statistical, and also all the managers of those people who had even more depth of knowledge to test it and work it. So when we went to the executives, um, we had a really good story to tell,
Mhm.
right? And it was super easy for them to say yes,
Mhm.
because one of their first questions was, "What about these three people that manage parts of those teams?" And we were like, "Oh yeah, they all love it. Do you want to talk to them?"
Right.
And we got a resounding yes, go and built it, and then we spent the next 7 months um, as fast as we could building it. Um,
Yeah.
but that was one of those. What's the tiniest things we can build? Because for us at that point, the the velocity of the tool was a critical piece, um, because the old tool was super slow,
Mhm.
and also we changed a bunch of workflow stuff to make it work. Um, so we had to change company business processes along the way. But the crux was the people that are actually going to be most impacted
Mhm.
all liked it,
Yep.
and that was our big win. Was getting the people to go, yeah, yeah, we want this, like, please build it.
Okay.
So yeah.
Largely, we've described the same process in two very
Oh,
different ways.
okay, good,
Um,
awesome.
yeah,
Yeah.
but you mentioned something early on about an MVP, which I think you meant, just having a small team of super skilled people. Is that what you meant by that?
It's they might be super skilled, or like years and years ago, I did a wireframe MVP.
Mhm.
Um,
Oh, you meant minimum viable product.
Minimum viable product. Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
thought you meant most valuable player, like,
Oh, no,
team of superstars.
no. No, yeah, I get the confusion. So minimum viable product,
Sure.
like I did one years ago that was just all
Yeah,
squares and circles, and like super basic,
yeah,
um, because I wanted to, with as fast as I could, get something, number one, in front of the operators that were going to be using it, the end users, stakeholders, but also I wanted to get to the engineering team, because I wanted the end users to go, yeah, yeah, that's what we need, and I wanted the engineering team to give me a time estimate for how long it would take to build it and how complex it would be.
yeah.
Because I was operating on a super tight window,
Mhm.
and I the the feedback cycle was the most important thing for me, you know.
Right,
Um,
and getting feedback quickly is
yeah,
important.
yeah, and so this clickable thing that I built with wireframes, it allowed both ends to take a look at it, to play with it. I got a time estimate that I was happy with. The end user was like, "Oh my god, that's exactly what I want. It's ugly, but
Sure.
but he didn't care, right?
Yeah.
the stakeholders in that context didn't care. And so, as soon as he said yes, went to the engineering team and said, go to town.
Sure.
Um,
And then the UI people can make it look nice.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. Well, the UI people were part of that engineering team. And just when I gave them the wireframe, they immediately started thinking about, oh my God, Bill's a horrible artist, but we're gonna figure out how to make this look better.
Yeah.
And which is all I cared about, really. Like, I was like, roughly like this. Here's all the
Well,
action.
sure, but you don't want to take the time of making it pretty and then, really, really nice, like a finished product, and then realize that 90% of it has to change based on user feedback. You've wasted a lot of time.
Exactly. Yeah, I was trying to really, like, as fast as I could, get the feedback cycle and the functionality, and like, what was it that I missed from the stakeholders. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, so we had a really fast. I was super stoked about that project because our timeline was fast. We beat the timeline, and it started making money on day one,
Nice.
which made me really well, because there was demand for the product.
Sure.
There were people like, we really want this. Um, and they were basically lined up to give us money as soon as we could ship it out the door. And I think that product, I think we were net profitable in less than 6 months,
Mm.
which was, like, the company was very pleased about that.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
executives were like, that was cool. Thank you. Next. So this has been awesome. I just look at the clock and realize I've taken way more of your time than I originally thought I would. Your generosity is amazing. This has been super cool. Thank you.